So it's been a week and a half since Super Bowl 59 when the Philadelphia Eagles took home their second Vince Lombardi trophy in a 40 to 22 win over the Kansas City Chiefs, and this was the second Super Bowl loss by Patrick Mahomes, and not only that, but the second time that he's been blown out in the Super Bowl. And even though the Chiefs have been consistently great since 2019, basically 2018, if you want to go back a little bit to when Mahomes became the full-time starter, the Chiefs have built up a dynasty, and they have won 3 Super Bowls since 2019, which sounds really good, and that is very good indeed. However, how did the Kansas City Chiefs stack up against the dynasties of the Super Bowl era is the question that I'm talking about on this video right here. So let's get on into it. And these are my strict opinions right here. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. So first, I'm going to go ahead and just go over what the Kansas City Chiefs have done in their dynasty. So as I mentioned, the Chiefs have won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years. So that's pretty decent right there. But they've also made the AFC Championship game every year since 2018. And with the awards along the way, Patrick Mahomes has taken home 2 MVPs in the regular season. He won Offensive Player of the Year. And in all 3 of Kansas City's Super Bowl wins, Mahomes has won Super Bowl MVP. But really, only Patrick Mahomes won the awards. So that is a pretty dominant run right there. When you're consistently going to the AFC Championship, and when you are a heavy favorite to make the Super Bowl every year, yeah, you're going to be a dynasty. So let's take a look at how they stack up against the other dynasties with that being said. So in the Super Bowl era, there have been 4 other dynasties, and I'm just going to go in chronological order. The 70s Steelers, the 80s 49ers, the 90s Cowboys, and the new millennium Patriots. So I'm going to compare the Kansas City Chiefs to the other dynasties of the NFL and see where they fall. So starting with my beloved Pittsburgh Steelers of the 1970s. In the 70s, the Steelers won 4 rings in 6 years. From 1974 to 1979, the Steelers won the Super Bowl. The Steelers also made 6 AFC championships in the 1970s, also making it in 72 and 76. But Pittsburgh lost both those games. The awards is where it really shines for the Steelers right here, as Chuck Noll didn't win the entire league coach of the year, but he did win AFC coach of the year in 1972. Franco Harris won offensive rookie of the year, and he also won Super Bowl MVP. Mean Joe Green was a 2-time defensive player of the year. Jack Lambert was defensive rookie of the year and a defensive player of the year. Mel Blount won Defensive Player of the Year as well. Lynn Swann took home a Super Bowl MVP. And Terry Bradshaw, who everyone says is overrated, but I argue he's underrated, won regular season MVP in 1978, and he was a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. So as you can see, the Steelers won a lot of awards, and they were spread out on both sides of the ball right there, on top of winning more rings than Kansas City had, and basically in a little bit of a longer time span right there. So this one was pretty difficult to decide, actually. But you also got to factor in the competition that the Steelers played. In the AFC, the Steelers consistently had to face the Oakland Raiders in the playoffs. They met in the playoffs every year from 1972 to 76, actually. Miami Dolphins were a great team back then under Don Shula, including the infamous undefeated team back in 1972. And the Houston Oilers, they were consistently on the Steelers' ankles throughout the 70s as well. I don't really talk about the NFC a whole lot when it comes to interconferences but I'll just do it for the sake of this video. The Cowboys were great. The Rams actually led the league in wins from 1973 to 79 back in the 1970s. And the Minnesota Vikings were a solid team back in the 70s as well. So the Steelers had a lot of competition in their dynasty days as well. Not to say Kansas City didn't have a lot of competition as well. But really, other than the tail end of the Patriots dynasty, the Buffalo Bills, led by Josh Allen and Sean McDermott, and maybe the Cincinnati Bengals, no one has really been able to stand up to the Kansas City Chiefs. And that should be an argument in favor of the Chiefs right there. But it kind of shows the lack of competition that they've gone up against. I would throw the Baltimore Ravens in there as well, but the Chiefs have usually beaten the Ravens in their dynasty days. So the reason that I edge the competition out to the Steelers' favor is because those teams at some point were actually able to beat the Steelers in the 70s, more specifically the Raiders. So that's a big deciding factor right there. And then also you got to take a look at Super Bowl appearances and records right there. Now, normally I would give the edge to the team who has more appearances, and in this case, it's Kansas City making 5 Super Bowls as opposed to the Steelers 4 of the 70s. However, the Steelers went 4-0 in the Super Bowl while Kansas City went 3-2. So, like, if the Chiefs were 4-1 in the Super Bowl, then obviously it'd be a moot point for me. But for me, it's an instance of both quality and quantity here, and I think that's what I tend to lean towards. So I'm not saying it just because I'm a Steeler fan, but I'm saying it when you factor in all the considerations right here. The fact the Steelers, at least for right now, have won more rings in the 70s than the Chiefs currently have, and the fact that more players won more awards than it was just basically Patrick Mahomes winning it all for Kansas City. And the Steelers faced a lot more competition in their dynasty days. I think I'm going to give the edge to the 70 Steelers right now. Although I will say, if the Chiefs win maybe one more ring, and like they have to win it in 2025, but if the Chiefs win one more ring, then they possibly move ahead of the Steelers, which I hate to say as a Steeler fan. But for right now, I'm going to say the 70 Steelers is still the better dynasty over the current Chiefs. Then we got the 80s 49ers. So taking a look at what the 49ers did in the 80s. San Francisco won 4 rings in 9 years. 1981 to 1989, San Francisco won the Super Bowl. They made it to 5 NFC championships. The only one they lost was the only one they lost was, I believe, in 1983, if I'm not mistaken. Then you take a look at the awards as well. Montana was a regular season MVP, but he technically also won it in 1990 as well. So if you want to count that along with his 89 MVP, go ahead and be my guest. But I'm focusing on strictly the 80s right here. And yes, I do know that the 49ers also won the Super Bowl in 1994. But most of their rings came in the 80s. So, like I said, I'm focusing strictly on the 80s right here for the 49ers. Anyway, Joe Montana was season MVP in 1989, and he was a 3-time Super Bowl MVP as well. He also won Comeback Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year as well. Bill Walsh took home a Coach of the Year. Jerry Rice was an Offensive Player of the Year and the Super Bowl 23 MVP. Roger Craig also won an Offensive Player of the Year as well. So, again, kind of like the Steelers, the 49ers won a lot of awards as well, individual awards. And as you can see, once again, it's a lot more spread out. Where, yeah, you do have Joe Montana winning the majority of them, but again, you got your other contributors when it comes to the awards as well. Again, with Kansas City, it was Patrick Mahomes just winning all the awards. So, then you got to take a look at also the competition. So back in the 80s, I mean, the 49ers, they obviously had the dynasty in the 80s, but you also had to take in consideration that the Rams were a great team in the 80s as well. And that was really the peak of the Rams 49ers rivalry, was back in the 1980s. The New York Giants were a great team in the 80s as well. You had a great team in the 85 Chicago Bears, and it wasn't just that. The Bears were also a great team in the mid to late 80s as well. And the Washington Redskins have a proud history of being a great team in the 1980s as well. They were all great, but the thing here is that the AFC was kind of weak. So aside from a couple of really good seasons in the AFC, it was kind of to nobody's surprise that San Francisco won all those Super Bowls. And again, that could lean in Kansas City's favor right here because the NFC, you could argue that all the teams that the Chiefs have played in the Super Bowl in their dynasty days, their opponent was better than them. So again, that should lean in Kansas City's favor right there. But again, they have won only 3 Super Bowls in 5 appearances, while much like the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 70s, the 49ers were also perfect at 4-0. And I tend to lean towards the team that had more appearances. But again, San Francisco was 4-0 compared to 3-2 for Kansas City. So I kind of lean towards the better record triumphing for this particular matchup again, once again. So I also know, like I said, Kansas City has also appeared in more AFC championships than San Francisco did NFC championships. So that should also lean in Kansas City's favor right there. But again, that just kind of shows that the NFC had a lot of parity back then, while the AFC really not so much. So again, why does that lead into San Francisco's favor, in my opinion, is because the 49ers were able to beat a lot of those teams, but there were also teams that gave the 49ers a lot of problems as well, more specifically the New York Giants. Whereas Kansas City, like I said, really the only team in the playoffs in the AFC that have given the Chiefs a trouble are the Bengals. Okay, so again, the competition is where it really comes down to which dynasty is the better one. So my deciding factor here, it's very similar to the Steelers right here. San Francisco did win 4 rings in 9 years, which is shorter than Kansas City winning 3 and 5. But overall, I still think I'm going to lean towards the 80s 49ers here, just because they have a better award resume than Kansas City does. They had better competition than Kansas City currently does. And the fact that, like I said, in this particular instance right here, I lean towards the record in the Super Bowl rather than appearances. So it was a little bit of a close call right here, but I think the 80s 49ers does beat the Kansas City Chiefs current dynasty. Now, for the one that I'm probably the most unsure of, we got the current Kansas City Chiefs against the 90s Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys of the 90s, they were obviously really good. They won 3 rings in 4 years. They won it back-to-back in 92 and 93. And then over here in Pittsburgh, we don't talk about what happened in 1995. But there you go with the Dallas Cowboys right there. 3 rings in 4 years. They also only made it to a very underwhelming 4 NFC championships. I mean, people talk about how great the Cowboys were in the 90s, and they were. They were great. But they only made 4 NFC championships. You thought that they'd have made it to a lot more. The only one they lost was in 1994, and that was to an absolutely incredible 49ers team back in the 1994 season. And obviously, the Cowboys haven't made it back to an NFC championship since 1995. Dallas did go 3-0 in the Super Bowl, and while being undefeated in the Super Bowl is great, Kansas City went to more. So I'm not really too concerned about the record right here, unlike the Steelers and 49ers where they were both perfect in the Super Bowl. But this is like the rare instance here. Like, they both have 3 rings. And while, yes, generally being undefeated in the Super Bowl is a really good look, you also got to figure Kansas City went to more Super Bowls than the Cowboys have, and that number's only going to go up. Okay. The only awards that the Cowboys won, it's very similar to the Kansas City Chiefs. The only awards that the Cowboys won in the 90s were Super Bowl awards, and that was Emmitt Smith winning Super Bowl MVP, Troy Aikman winning Super Bowl MVP, and Larry Brown winning Super Bowl MVP. So really the awards that the Cowboys won were kind of underwhelming. And then as far as the competition goes, I think this is my deciding factor right here. Really, the only teams in the NFC that the Cowboys had to worry about in the 90s were the 49ers and the Packers. And Dallas beat them more often than they did. And like I said, the only time that they really didn't beat San Francisco was the 94 season. But the Cowboys always beat the Packers back in the 90s, and they beat the 49ers in 2 NFC championships before the 94 season. Okay. So that was really it. But before that 1992 season where the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, the Giants and the Redskins were both better than them, and they were the 2 previous Super Bowl champions as well. And then while you got the 49ers falling from dominant to just very good, the Cowboys had that drop off as well. And then where you got the Kansas City Chiefs, they went to way more AFC championships than Dallas did NFC championships. And even though the Chiefs, they have kind of slowed down, you could say, over the past 2 seasons, the Chiefs still went on deep playoff runs. The Cowboys run after they won the Super Bowl in 1995, Dallas was never really the same again. They, like I said, they can't get past the divisional round. They fell victim to even an expansion team in the Carolina Panthers. And they even let the Arizona Cardinals win a playoff game for the first time in over half a century. That is just mind-blowing right there. Kansas City would not allow something like that. So, like I said, this is the one that I'm the most unsure of when it comes to comparing dynasties, all right? But I think the competition is where I draw the line. They both have a similar award resume, whereas Dallas's awards came in the Super Bowl with just 3 different players. Kansas City also won regular season awards as well. Again, all of them went to Patrick Mahomes, but the Chiefs also have both regular season and Super Bowl awards as well. And then, of course, you got the competition in the AFC. Like I said, the only team that really gave Kansas City a lot of trouble were the Bengals, whereas the Cowboys, they were consistently, well, almost consistently beating the 49ers and the Packers in the playoffs, and the rest of the NFC was kind of underwhelming. Whereas Kansas City, yeah, the AFC was a little underwhelming as well, but at least there was a team that could stand up to them. So like I said, again, I am not completely sure of which to go with right here, but I think Kansas City's dynasty slightly one-ups the 90s Cowboys here because they made it to more Super Bowls, because they've made it to more conference championships, and because, unlike the Cowboys run in the 90s, Kansas City was still able to make some deep playoff runs, whereas the Cowboys after 1995, they really weren't the same dominant team anymore, and that's to be determined with Kansas City. So yeah, I think the Chiefs dynasty slightly one-ups the 90s Cowboys for right now, and we'll see how it goes from there. And then finally, we got the new millennium Patriots. Now, this is an interesting one because obviously the Patriots won 6 Lombardis in 18 years, but in those 18 years, they won 3 in 4 years and then 3 in 5 years in the 2010s and the early 2000s, respectively. New England went to 13 AFC championships, including every year from 2011 to 2018. And then you take a look at the awards. Tom Brady was a 4-time Super Bowl MVP and a 3-time regular season MVP. He won 2 Offensive Player of the Years, and he won Comeback Player of the Year in 2009. Bill Belichick took home 3 Coach of the Years. Deion Branch took home a Super Bowl MVP. That was in Super Bowl 39. Teddy Bruschi won Comeback Player of the Year. Gerard Mayo surprisingly won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Rob Gronkowski took home a Comeback Player of the Year. Julian Edelman was the MVP of Super Bowl 53. And Stephon Gilmore was the Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. Now, the Patriots, they faced some pretty tough competition in the AFC in their dynasty years, and that's where it automatically leans in their favor right there. They had Peyton Manning's Colts. They had the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had the Baltimore Ravens usually giving them a lot of trouble. They had the Denver Broncos giving them some fits. They had the Kansas City Chiefs giving them some fits. And they also had the beginning of the current Chiefs dynasty. And arguably, most of New England's Super Bowl opponents were better than them. Similar to the Kansas City Chiefs' current dynasty right now, you could make that argument with them. And as we all know, New England made it to 9 Super Bowls and they won 6 of them. So they're winning 2/3 of their Super Bowls right there. Meanwhile, Kansas City is winning just 60% of theirs. So again, right there, it doesn't really matter about the percentage wise for me right here. But as far as all the points that I've made in this video, are you starting to see what I'm getting at right here? Either way, the record is basically a moot point when comparing these two dynasties right here. Because, like I said, the Pats made it to 9 Super Bowls, which is almost twice as many as Kansas City's been. And they have twice as many rings as the Chiefs have. Basically, the Patriots dynasty set the standard and the blueprint of what a dynasty in the NFL is supposed to be, as much as it burns me to say that as a Steeler fan. So even though I kind of am rooting for the Chiefs dynasty to overtake this one, I don't see it happen. Give me New England's dynasty all day over the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty. So with all that being said, here is my current dynasty rankings in the Super Bowl era. I am putting the 90s Cowboys at 5th. I am putting the current Kansas City Chiefs as the 4th best dynasty in the Super Bowl era, followed by the 80s 49ers in a very tough 3rd place. And the reason that I put the 70s Steelers at 2nd is because the Steelers and 49ers both won 4 rings, but the Steelers did it in a shorter time span. And they also made it to more conference championships and they won more awards than the 49ers did. So that's why I give the slight edge to the 70 Steelers in the 2nd spot. And then obviously the new millennium Patriots are the best dynasty of the Super Bowl era. So in conclusion, the Kansas City Chiefs have a really good dynasty going on so far, and they could possibly win a couple more rings. But in order for them to be the best dynasty, they really have to be able to surpass the mark than what the Steelers did in the 70s and what the 49ers did in the 80s. Like I said, I think with one more ring, they at least tie the Steelers and possibly surpass the 49ers. But as far as where they stack up against the best dynasties, Kansas City really is not that far off. They just, like I said, they need to keep making it to the conference championships. They need a couple more awards on their resume. And if the AFC does get indeed loaded and Kansas City is able to beat those teams, then I think you have a better case for putting Kansas City higher up on this list. But for right now, I think they take 4th place as far as the 5 dynasties goes in the Super Bowl era. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think down